Hello, and let's welcome to all of our classes that are catching um, this virtual meetup. I want to thank all of those kiddos in Mrs. Represso's class. Shout out to Plummer. No, wait, you're Lewis Middle School. If you are at Lewis Middle School, everybody give us a thumbs up because we can see you. Just about everybody. We want to welcome you all this afternoon and say happy Computer Science Education Week. We have a surprise for you all. As you can see, we have a couple of guests here with us. And I'm going to start off with the first question, which is going to allow them to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. Let's say I give you each 2 minutes instead of 60 seconds. So we're going to start off with an elevator pitch. Imagine this. And I'll go first. I'm Shayna Glass, and I am here in Aldine Independent School District. I'm over in the Professional Learning Building, where I support all of computer science. So I support all of you in this class, and I hope you enjoy this brief moment in time where you get to learn from someone other than your computer science teacher. But today, we brought in a couple of special guests who actually do what we hope you will become one day. So, with that being said, I want to welcome these two guests and ask the very first question, which is given 2 minutes on an elevator, and Mrs. Represso's classroom is the elevator. If given 60 seconds, what was your route or path to computer science? How did you get there? Introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself, and you got 120 seconds.
Do you want me to go first, Scott?
Go ahead, Ritika.
Okay. So, hi everybody. I'm Ritika. I'm a software engineer and I work at Dell. I work on our website, dell.com. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. Anyways, I'll tell you a little bit about my path to CS. When I was a kid, I just wanted to do something that would help others, and I wasn't sure what I would do in college. So I started taking some CS classes because I found I was really interested in math and I liked all the logical computations that classes that I had taken. So as I took those classes, I really enjoyed them, and I went on to get my degree in engineering at the University of Michigan. After that, I went to a few conferences because you learn a lot at conferences, and I met my future manager there. And that's how I ended up being at Dell. Yeah,
Wait,
and
you met me at a conference?
no, my previous manager
Oh,
who
okay.
hired me. Sorry, I met Sarika at a conference. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah. So that was great, and that's how I came to Austin, and I worked with Dell's ever since.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Scott. I've been in programming and software engineering for close to 30 years now. I actually started programming when I was your age. My father and I built our first computer when I was 11 years old, and I read every manual that came with it, and I learned the 3 programming languages that it supported, and I started writing programs. I liked to create pictures on the computer so that they would show. Back then, it was only 7 different colors of green, not multicolors. Now we can do a whole lot of great things with graphics. But I always did really well in my math and computer science classes, but I was always artistically natured. So I went to college for music because that's what I really loved. But partway through that, I definitely realized that I had some strengths still in computer science. So I worked my way through college in the Center for Computing and Information Systems at Dell, or not at Dell, sorry, Baylor is where I went to college. And I ended up tutoring a lot of people in computer languages while I was working there. So after I got out of college, I realized I probably wasn't going to make a great career in music, although I love it. So I ended up programming right off the bat, and I've never looked back. I've done some network administration, programming in lots of different languages over the years, and I've been at Dell for nearly 10 years, and I've moved my way up from just a software engineer, pretty much in the same spot Ritika is, and now I'm the manager, and I manage teams all over the world. We have an extremely diverse community of engineers in multiple countries everywhere that we work with every day. It's a really wonderful place to be and a great experience.
Excellent. So, students, I am going to ask you if you have any questions. Now, I know that Mrs. Repressa has selected a few of you. If there's some questions that you have to follow up on anything that either one of these great people are sharing, feel free to ask Ms. Repressa if she can add it to the chat. Know that this is also being streamed live, so you all are literally being watched across the district on YouTube right now. So there are other classes out there, and if you have questions, we are definitely watching and paying attention to what you are seeing from your classrooms. So if you have any questions for them, please drop them in the chat as well. So I'm going to turn it over to which student in the room would like to go first. When you come up, can you share your name, just your first name, and your question?
Hey, my name is Justin, and my question is, who was the primary influencer to steer you to consider computer science, and why?
All right. Okay, I can answer that. Hi, Justin. Thanks for your question. So when I was in school, I was pretty much your age. One of my favorite teachers happened to be a computer science teacher. I think he was probably my primary influencer. And at the time, I didn't know if I wanted to do computer science, but I wanted to do really well in his class because I wanted him to like me and wanted to be in his good books. So I worked really hard, and I think because I worked hard in that class, I started to really enjoy it. So then I came into college, and I was very lucky to be on a research project with one of my professors. And he was somebody who was extremely passionate about the work he was doing. He was working on different types of algorithms and optimizations. And while that might sound boring sometimes, if you work with somebody who's extremely passionate, it kind of rubs off on you. And that's really where I started feeling that this was the right path for me. Yeah, I think that's my answer.
I didn't have a lot of the formal computer science training that Ritika had, and that a lot of people who end up in my industry do. So I'm very much self-taught. I'm not going to say I'm my own primary influencer. That's a little weird. But I think my father actually encouraged me a lot. Like when I told you I got our very first computer, he was very encouraging, and he's the one who showed me all the books and showed me the capabilities. It wasn't too long before I definitely got past what he could do, and he just kind of let me go, but was always very encouraging when I wanted to do things like that. Later on in life, my father came back around. In one of his retirement jobs, he started repairing computers. And so he kind of followed me in my footsteps in my career. He's now fully retired, and he's just a professional Santa Claus. But I think my father is the primary driving force behind me. So, thank you. Thank you, Justin.
Excellent question. So do we have another student who would like to share?
Hello, my name is Sophia, and I've got a question. What programming language do you prefer and why?
Ooh.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So I feel that programming languages have there's always going to be more and more programming languages as we improve, right? What's I feel that more than a language, what's most important is to know the basics, know the fundamentals, and always know what different programming variables are or what functions are. I think if you have a good understanding of the fundamentals, you can find the good and pros and cons in any language, and you can learn to love any language in programming.
I actually agree quite a bit with Ritika. I actually used to put on my resume that I could learn any language in a week, given enough coffee. Because the truth is, the basic concepts are the same with any language. You know, you have control flow structures, you have variables. It's just they say it in slightly different ways. And in fact, these days, a lot of modern programming languages are even based off of each other. So each generation kind of trades back, and you get Java and C and C sharp, and they're all very, very similar. So at Dell, we use C sharp. That's our primary programming language. But there are other groups within Dell that also use Python. And honestly, my personal hobby favorite is called F sharp. It's a functional programming language that's a lot more concise than some of the other modern ones. But I think Python has definitely taken a lot of the industry over when it comes to that. And Python's also being used in a lot of machine learning and AI environments now. So we're kind of starting to play with using that in some of our other small research projects that we're doing, like Ritika's working on.
So I'm going to add to that question.
Yeah.
And the question is, what language do you think students should start with learning with?
I'll start with that, Ritika. I think it used to be Java, but I truly think that Python, because it is a much more straightforward programming language, the syntax isn't very difficult. It teaches the structures very clearly and very directly. So I think it's a very good instructional language, and I'm glad that it started to get into the schools now, because the days of me having to help people out with their Java projects is over. So
Thank you. Do we have another student who would like to share?
My name is Anthony, and how do y'all support computer science in schools?
I'll start with that, Ritika. I am actually a volunteer teaching assistant here in the Aldine School District for Blanson CTE. That's the Computer Technology and Engineering school within the Aldine School District. This past year was my first year volunteering for that. And it was a really great experience. It kind of got a little shortened this year because of our current health situation here in the world. But it was a really, really fun experience getting started and getting trained and doing everything that we could do this year. Prior to this year, I've actually done several sessions just like this, particularly for the Hour of Code day. I did one for an elementary school up in Round Rock, Texas, and I've done another one for a middle school in, I think it was Flower Mound up near Dallas. So I've done this a few times for the Hour of Code. This is my first official time doing it here in the Houston area. I do live in the Houston area, and I grew up here. So having a little bit of a closer community connection, I like it here. Ritika?
Sure. So I regularly make sure that I'm available, to talk to students just like you, to ask any questions that you have. And I'm very happy that I was able to do this today. But even prior to this, especially last year, I did a couple of panels with students with a group called Girls Who Code here in Austin, and I also make sure that even on online platforms like LinkedIn or any other platform like Twitter. I'm always available to answer any questions from my fellow community, and yeah, that's what I do.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to piggyback on that
Yeah.
just to give some of the students, because we do, we're seeing that there's more campuses that are jumping on. There's like 5 different schools watching
Awesome.
outside of Lewis. And so I want to just tell students, take this opportunity to say what Scott was mentioning. It's at Blanson, but it's also at Davis High School. It's at Davis Nice. It's at all of the ninth grade centers. So if you are interested in this, you can continue and also get the support from those who work in the industry, just like Scott and Ritika. It's really important that you know that you can be them. You heard Ritika say she met her boss just by attending a conference, and we would love to send students to those type of events so that you can see what you can become. So I just want to put that out there, and those who are out there in the land, definitely drop a question. I'm seeing from the back end that there are some other students paying attention. So in Miss Repressa's classroom, is there another question?
Hi, my name is Brisha. If you would give advice to your teenage self, what would you be? What would you do?
So the question is, if you could give advice to your teenage self, what would it be?
Do you want me to go ahead, Scott?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, from when I was a kid, I used to be very scared of asking questions, whether that was in class or even that was it anybody, even to my teacher, as to why things happened a certain way, or why we were learning something, or I thought that the goal of learning was just to read it and know it, right? And it took me a while, like when I grew up, almost even after college, when I realized that it's very important to not only understand what things are, but how they work and why they work that way. So I know that you guys, I mean, I don't know how it is for you, but when I grew up, there was a lot of pressure to do well in your class and get a lot of good grades. And I focused a lot on that, and that's important. But it's also very important to understand what you're learning and to keep asking those questions. There's no bad questions, and yeah. So just that's what I would tell myself, my teenage self, that just ask the questions that you have, even if you think that they're not good questions. So be brave. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that the thing that I've learned the most in my career, which, as I've already pointed out, is been one that's been a couple of several decades now. What I would say is, sure, if you really, really love something and you want to pursue that, you absolutely should. But there's nothing that says you can't change your mind and change your direction later. It's really okay. Especially these days. I mean, people are interested in so many different things. There's nothing that says you can't, go pursue something for a while and then pursue something else. When I went to college and I went for music, I loved it. I had a wonderful time through college. But when I came out and I decided to go into a different career, it was one that I had to then really motivate myself to learn what I needed to do. I felt like, and now that I'm a manager of and hiring people right out of college, they've got coming out of college with a computer science degree is really great. And it definitely positions them well to start a career in computer science. But if you don't do that, you can still get there. It's just going to take you a lot of work, especially if you're changing directions in your career. You may have to start over. And if you're okay with that, go for it. Do what you really love. Do what you enjoy. You know, it doesn't always have to be exactly about, you know, finding one thing and doing that for your entire life.
Excellent. We have another student who has a question from the classroom. She come on up and share her question?
When you got started first coding, was it confusing?
Yeah.
She had a two-part question. She also wanted to know, how did you get past that confusion and not just give up?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. Scott, do you want to go first, or?
Sure, I'll jump on it. Yes, it was very confusing. And like I explained, that first computer that my dad and I built supported several different programming languages, so I played with them all. So that obviously you guys get to focus on one language, which is good. But I, had a couple of different ones that I was playing with. So it got a little bit confusing, and I had to look in manuals because I didn't have the internet to look things up. So I had these giant binders. There were like 20 gray binders that were this thick that had all of the language and syntax and everything like that. And I had to stumble through it because there wasn't really anyone to teach me at the time. So even to this day, if I'm learning a new language, I will still go and look for an online manual and look for the syntax, because all of the data structures are similar, but the syntax for the languages is different. So how I got past the confusion and not give up is I made myself projects. If you've got a goal, even if it's a small one, it helps you get through the things that you need to learn to accomplish that thing. So even if it's just I want to create a New York City skyline on the screen, that means that I had to go through and figure out, okay, how do I draw lines? How do I change the color? How do I do this? Once you learn those things and you can put it into steps, then you can accomplish those steps and achieve your goal. That's how I went about it. It's not everybody's way of doing it, but that was my path. Ritika, what was yours?
Yeah, so first thing is, yes, when you first start coding, it's very confusing. I think I was confused for a good 2 to 3 years. So it wasn't something that came naturally to me. And it's okay if it doesn't come naturally to you at first, okay? But what I did was try to really figure out what is it that I'm not understanding, and then go to my teachers, go to people that I looked up to, and ask them those questions, even if it felt even if I felt like, oh, maybe they'll think that I'm stupid, right? So I think it took me a while to get past that fear and then really understand it. I think the key is, if you start asking the questions, if you can figure out, okay, this is what I don't understand. I don't understand why something like this is happening. Go ahead and ask them. It might help someone else understand as well, and somebody else who might be in the same position. And just remember that and everyone finds coding confusing. Most people do find coding confusing at first, and it's totally normal. So
Okay, so we have two questions coming from different ends.
yeah.
Okay, the first question is, we have a lot of students who are newcomers or even bilingual and not
Yeah.
with CS as the language.
Right.
How can we encourage and support them so that they feel that they can be successful? The second part, which is a different question but not really, is how can we, or how should school districts go about ensuring that there is equitable access for all, which kind of does lend into that first question. And I'm gonna be frank; these are coming from teachers that does these. So, but definitely, how can we support our newcomers and students who are bilingual, and maybe really learning the English language to also learn a third language in computer science, or maybe a fourth. Just depends, right? Because there's so many different languages in computer science. And then how should school districts make sure that it's equitable for all students?
Ritika, why don't you start that one, because you started out as bilingual, if I am correct, in
Yes.
my thinking. So
Yes. I am bilingual. And it was actually interesting for me because when I first started, I was in a Hindi school, so I knew Hindi really well, but I didn't know English really well. And for middle school and high school, I went to an English medium school. So still learned Hindi, but we all the instruction was in English, and then we learned Hindi as a second language. And I felt that some of my favorite subjects were subjects like math and computer science. And the reason for that was because those were symbols, I understood them those because I didn't need to know either of those languages to understand what was happening, to figure out, okay, if I write something like this on the screen, it produces a certain output. So I think one of the biggest ways to kind of help that is have more demos. So instead of doing whiteboards, if you have a computer in front of you, and just let people try out what happens when you click something or when you program, give them. Okay, so one thing my teacher used to do, she used to give us these sample programs, and I think at the time they were in Java. We used to use a software called BlueJ. It was a small software. So she'd give us this code samples, and then she'd say, play with it, try deleting things, try adding things, see what happens. And I feel like I learned the most from those classes and enjoyed the most because I didn't have to figure out how to translate between languages in those classes.
and I think I can add a little bit to that,
Yeah.
that one of the things we talk about in computer science is abstraction, and that's separating the content from the actual functionality. All
Right.
right. And computer languages are an abstraction away from our real languages and the functionality that we're trying to accomplish. So if computer science teachers take a determined stand and say, when I create variables, I'm going to use abstract names instead of specific words. Okay. You can create variables with any name you want, but if you use one specific language, you're almost intentionally being exclusive. So name them abstractly, call them A, B, C. We like in our business for our variables to be named for what they do. So when you actually start working or doing something, they may have certain guidelines about what you name your variables, but from an instructional perspective, you don't necessarily need to do that. And I think by thinking along those lines, and does my program actually demonstrate what it does if somebody does not understand English? It should. any program in any programming language should still demonstrate what the functionality is, no matter what language you understand.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that kind of speaks to the next part or the next question, in that the way that school districts can go about it is just like in a business like Dell, we have certain programming guidelines and standards for how we do things. I think school districts could go the same route. They could come up with a certain set of, this is how we structure our programs, have coding standards that you teach, from that perspective. And I think that will allow a little bit more of openness towards it. It doesn't matter if you understand Spanish or Hindi or English or any other language. The computer language should be filtered down to where any of them could understand it.
Computer language is definitely universal, regardless of the
It can be, definitely. Yeah.
Yep.
So one final question, as we want to thank you guys for your time. One final question, because their class periods are brief. What is one thing that you would want to share with them moving forward? If you could give them a piece of advice to these students, encouragement, cheering, rah-rah, if there's something that you would like to say to the students, what would you want them to know?
Go ahead, Ritika, you start.
Okay.
Think about it.
Well, first of all, I should let you know that you guys are already ahead of the game. You guys know Python. Python is a language that a lot of us are still learning, figuring it out. So you should feel really good that you have this access to great education that it's giving you a great opportunity. So I feel like, first of all, that's an achievement, right? But what I would say is, just make sure, just be brave and just see what you like. And I guess I wish you all the best, but I think I'm really confident that almost every person in this class could succeed in computer science if they went that route, for sure.
I absolutely agree. You really can do, whatever you want. If you really have an interest in computer science and it's one of those things that you like to dive into the problem, you like to get it done, that's what I love. And that's why I've ended up here. That's why I like mentoring and bringing other people in to do the same thing. But you don't have to do it for the rest of your life. And I can guarantee you that if any of you do go into computer science, in 20 years, you will probably not be writing Python anymore. There's going to be something else to write.
Yes.
Languages we work on now at Dell were not even dreams when I was first programming. And the languages that I first learned aren't even around anymore. They evolve. They become other languages. Other languages will adopt some things from that and add their own. Just like regular spoken languages, computer languages will evolve as well. So you really will be able to do anything you want. And what you're learning now, the concepts will apply, but you're going to have to keep learning as you go through your career.
I want to say to both of you, thank you so much for sharing. I want to say to the students, I know that those classes you're sitting in right now are not easy. I know you feel like your teachers are out to punish you. I know it. I'm speaking directly to Mrs. Repressa's class, because I know she can be tough at times. But the goal is, as she is applauding herself, and it is across the board for all of the teachers, because this isn't like your other classes. It's not intended to be. As Scott and Ratika just said, it's about solving problems. And we have a lot of them in the world. If you feel like you want to solve a problem, then you're in the right place. You just have to figure out what problem you want to solve and go for it. So I'm speaking to all of you. I'm also speaking to all of the other classes across the district and anyone else who may be watching as I have shared this. You, if you are a problem solver, not someone who complains, doesn't know where the solution is going to come from, or asking for the solution, but you are the one to give the solution, you're in the right place. And don't give up, regardless of the language that you know, the language that you speak. You are light years ahead of majority of us, and you don't even know it in that seat. I promise you, and that I know that they do too. So I want to say thank you for all of your time. Thank you for the questions, students. And if you have any more questions, we can shoot them over to both Ratika and Scott. Hopefully they'll come back and share, not just during Computer Science Education Week. These classes are, some of them a semester, most of them are year long. So these kids will take a part 2 of the course. And I know that they would love for you to be able to stop by and help them, or even see what they're working on. Give them feedback, help them debug their issues. So
Definitely.
thank you all, and we're gonna sign off. I know you guys have to get ready for, maybe you debrief in the classroom a little bit, then I know you're gonna get ready to switch. Oh, look, they're all waving. Thank you so much for jumping in. There will be another session to everybody who's here. There will be another session on Friday, same time, same place. And we hope to catch you guys there.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Appreciate it,
Thank you
Shana.
so much.
You are so welcome. And if you guys can hold on, we're going to stop the recording, or stop the stream, and we'll close out with both the students and the volunteers.